Morning, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to the keynote on the second day. I hope you had a really good party yesterday. So to make sure everyone is waking up, we're going to do a little exercise to get everyone started. So first quiz question. Who of you has worked with database branching and merging before? Show us some hands. OK. Either not really awake yet or you haven't tried it. So let's try again with another question. Who of you have worked with branching and merging in Git, GitHub, GitLab, something like that? OK, you're awake. Great.
Great. Yeah, this is what we hoped and thought. Branching and merging in GitHub or GitLab is a common thing. It feels so natural. Actually, many people who have started with version control with Git, they cannot imagine a world without it. But if we just go back 15 years, any of you still remember CVS or Subversion? Yeah. Oh. Rather not. OK. Well, so actually, I started my career at CollabNet, now Digital AI, and this was the company behind Subversion. I was part of Subversion 1.5. I apologize for that again. We had a plan for merging, right? But it was kind of an afterthought. And there was a joke at CollabNet that the best merging strategy for Subversion is don't, right? And then something interesting happened. The inventor of Linux, Linus Torvalds, he came up with this thing called Git in 2007. He did a famous, or should I rather say infamous, talk in Mountain View in Google's headquarters. Does any of you remember that talk? Some do. Yeah, I do as well. And it was kind of painful, but now, more than 15 years later, I guess the pain is over, and I can share 30 seconds of that one, because it's, in hindsight, kind of funny in Linus Torvalds style. You will see in a moment what I mean by that.
Nobody is interested in branching. Branches are completely useless unless you merge them. And CVS cannot merge anything at all. You can merge things once, but because CVS then forgets what you did, you can never, ever merge anything again without getting horrible, horrible conflicts. Merging in Subversion is a complete disaster. The Subversion people kind of acknowledge this, and they have a plan, and their plan sucks too. It is incredible how stupid these people are. They've been looking at the wrong problem all the time. Branching is not the issue, merging is.
Yeah, branching is not the issue. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Linus had a point, and he was bringing it up, typical Linus style. But to be fair, and using his own words, the usability of Git sucked too. Actually, the founders of GitHub, they didn't want to do version control or GitHub. They actually wanted to just work with a nice version control system, and they tried it out, and they failed, and they ran it on Twitter, and then they built a little side project to make it more usable, right? And I guess the rest is history. That was GitHub. So I joined GitHub after Subversion because I liked that workflow. Actually, the GitHub Flow was so powerful that we were printing T-shirts like this one, right? The GitHub Flow. And at GitHub, yeah, Lily was already working there. So Lily, take us away with the GitHub Flow just as a short reminder how it works.
Yeah, really quick refresher, because most of you have probably worked with it before. But GitHub wanted to create that safe space to innovate, right? So basically, before you made any changes, you would open up a new branch, a developer branch, where you commit your changes. Afterwards, you open your pull request to discuss everything with your team. Actually, fun fact, this is the laptop on which the pull request has been invented. It's in the GitHub Museum, so if you ever want to swing by, you should do that. But fun aside, you also check whether there's any merge conflicts, you run your tests, whatever, and then actually you ship. Right? And at GitHub, we shipped 500 times a week, something we were very proud of. And only afterwards you merged. And those 500 times per week were super easy for us because most of those changes actually did not include any database changes.
Yeah, we were doing many talks like at DevOpsCon or at WJAX, how we shipped 500 times a week to production. But this was mostly code. In the moment, there was database. That's kind of the dirty little secret. Branching is not the issue, merging is. And if you complete that sentence by another celebrity, one does not simply merge database changes to production. Why is that? Well, these are some anonymized quotes from our time at GitHub. And the biggest difference, I would say, between version control and databases is in version control, you can clearly see what other teams are up to. Like if you're changing code and some other team just removed that code in their pull request or merge request, then you have an idea. You would also learn about merge conflicts. Whereas in a database world, it can be that you're changing the type of a column, and it works perfect in isolation, and some other team is just adding an index on that column without knowing about the new type, and it also works nice in isolation, and then you both apply to the production database, and boom, right? You have a horrible performance, and you just learned when it's already too late, because there's data involved, right? And data, as my colleague Liz would say, has a lot of weight. So why is that important? If we, for instance, wanted to revert something in the database world, you would need to go to a backup, but that's not a nice idea because you have, in the meantime, already written new data to production. So it's not just like source code revert. Also, if you want to go forward, imagine you added a column. This is what we tried for our database at GitHub for the issues table, more than 2 terabytes of data. Let's add a column to it. What could possibly go wrong? Right? Well, after 6 hours, we knew what was going wrong. It had to be applied to every single row of those 2 terabytes of data. And this took 6 hours, which is not so big of a problem you might think. But during those 6 hours, there's a metadata log for the old table structure, so we basically couldn't write to the issues table for 6 hours. So we got on Hacker News for the wrong reasons. And then a couple of weeks, we tried this again and got on Hacker News again. And then we got super, super careful what we were actually doing with the database. And that's kind of the biggest dirty secret in this talk. Between 2014 and 2016, there was barely new features on GitHub, in case anybody remembered. Like there was the Dear GitHub letter, and the main reason for this is we were just too scary to touch anything. We just wanted to keep the database alive. So we had a really manual workflow with careful reviews about all the changes that were coming in. It took sometimes multiple days to address and apply them at a non-so-busy time. Yeah, and feature innovation basically stopped. Does anybody of you have ever seen a similar workflow or experienced similar problems with databases? Some do.
No hands, everyone's nodding though. Okay, we'll take that. Well, to us, honestly, when we joined PlanetScale, it felt a little bit like, well, weird that it didn't happen yet in the database world. So our analogy for this was every company that we knew that we worked with at GitHub, for instance, invested so much into making their DevOps lifecycle super, super fast, make developers happy, they loved it, it's super easy to iterate. It feels like a German Autobahn without like any speed limit. And then eventually, you're on your way to Italy, you hit the toll station. Remember when you drove there for your holiday and the system was just not designed? Like this is basically for us when after everything you've done, you hit like your database and that's where you're stuck. So what we wanted was basically we wanted to develop something that makes it very easy to do database branching and merging, which is why we created a web interface and a CLI to do it. And this is one way to do it, right? As you can see, the workflow is actually relatively similar to the GitHub flow. So when you want to do a schema change, you would basically create a developer branch from your main branch. You conduct your schema change there. You can test it in isolation. You can have a review. You can see whether there are any merge conflicts. And when you're done, you can merge it back into your main branch. So this is probably a little bit abstract. I just want to show you real quick what it looks like in PlanetScale. Because databases usually are very boring, we wanted to add a little bit of magic to it. So we're going to use a Harry Potter database to do this. This is going to be a super quick demo. But if you want to see more, we have a talk later this afternoon where we're going to go a little bit more into details. So this is the PlanetScale interface. As you can see here, I'm in like the PlanetScale demo organization. You can be part of different organizations. I am working with the Harry Potter database as promised. And right now, I'm on my main branch. I can see my schema. There's 2 tables in here. This table up here is going to be the one most interesting for the purpose of this little short demo here. As you can see, so this is about the Harry Potter characters. They have magic attributes such as, for instance, their wand ID, their patroness, and so on. And I can also check out in the console a little bit more what my database looks like. So, for instance, I can see how many characters I have in my database. It's 403. Maybe I also want to check if the main 3 characters are in there, and they are Harry Potter, Hermione, Ron, they're all there. And now what we want to do, something very cheeky, I want to remove the magic from all of them. So I'm going to try that. And I had a snag. And it's not because the demo gods aren't with me, but it is because PlanetScale actually does not allow me to make schema changes on the main branch. And the reason is because we don't want you to have like cold sweat on your head when you actually realize that you have dropped something that you shouldn't be dropping. So instead, what the console already suggests here is we actually open a developer branch. I can give this a name, I can choose my region, but in this case, I'm not going to do this because actually we have already created a branch up front for the sake of time here. So this is my remove magic branch, which I'm going to use. I can also connect this, for instance, to Laravel. I can also use PHP, Prisma, whatever you like. The schema looks exactly 100% the same as the one in the database before. The magic attributes are still here. So now I'm going to go to the console and remove the magic. And this worked. Now, of course, I want to open my deploy request, which is very similar to the GitHub pull request, right? So I'm creating this deploy request. And now, of course, I need someone to approve this. Johannes?
Yeah, let's go ahead and approve this. I mean, first we should have actually a look what we are going to approve. Sounds really scary. We are removing the magic of Harry Potter. It's not a good idea, but just for the sake of demonstration, we will do it, and then we will use some magic from Hermione, actually the time turner, to bring it back after we've wrote some more data. So first of all, we are deploying those changes, and this is using some technology, some open source technology called Ghost to do that in the background. Also, our database we test to make all of this happen. If you're interested in more details, there's a talk at 3 p.m. where we also show how this is all integrated, for instance, with the GitLab or GitHub pull request workflow. But for now, we just have merged those changes back into the main branch. So if we go to the main branch right now and go to the console, we can list our triplet, again, Harry, Hermione, Ron. And they're still there, but all of their magic attributes are gone. No columns for their patroness, wand ID, or whether they visited Hogwarts or not, right? And we could now go back to a backup to bring up the magic, because this was definitely a terrible idea. But in real life, there would be more data written since we applied those changes. Like, it could, for instance, be that Hermione, with her time turner, right? If anybody who could do real magic, it would be Hermione. She should be part of House PlanetScale. So I'm updating this record now that she's now part of House PlanetScale. And Lily and I, we want to be magicians as well. Let's try. So I will add Lily to that database. And I will add myself to that database. So now there should be 3 records of people inside of House PlanetScale. And when we are now bringing back the magic attributes, we hope that Lily and I are still in the database and Hermione is still of House PlanetScale, right? So we don't want to lose any data which has been written since then. So let's hope that the time turner magic actually does work. Going back to the deploy request and use the revert changes. So Lily, can you use the time turner?
Of course.
Of course. All right. So reverting those changes, this is also an asynchronous operation so that it never blocks any database in production, because you don't want to go on Hacker News for the wrong reasons. So things are reverted now. Let's check whether the magic actually worked. going back to the console, first of all, listing the 3 people of most interest. Hermione, Ron, and Harry are still there. Hermione is still house planet scale, but all the magic columns are back, including their content. Even if we have dropped the table, it would be back again. And let's also hope that Lily and I are still there. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to talk, right? So we are also still there. We are still not magicians yet, right? Because we didn't have any magic attributes fail. Let's see what we can do about that. But wrapping it all up, I hope you got a short impression of how branching and merging also makes sense in the database world. I mean, I learned the really hard, painful way during my time at CollabNet with Subversion that a concept itself is not sufficient. You need the technical foundations, right? You also need a nice UI, a workflow that people understand, and obviously a lot of luck. But if you have all of those, then a concept can become very, very powerful, and then it matures. And nowadays, it feels so natural that most folks don't even know how version control will feel without branching and merging. In the database world, we are still at the very beginning. We hope that we learned some lessons from the version control, like that you need a powerful workflow, that you need a nice UI. But whether this is actually true, whether we accomplished it or somebody else will accomplish it, only you can find out, right? So come to our booth, try out our database, comment on the context, give us feedback. We are very much looking forward to seeing how you shape the future of databases with branching and merging. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lily and Johannes.